The sight struck Alexander Sterling like a physical blow, a jagged sharp reality piercing the well-guarded fortress of his solitude. There, in the greasy dimness of Service Alley, a young woman, no, a girl, she looked so young, was hastily, almost shamefully, rescuing scraps of food from a discarded carton. The image, stark and brutal under the flickering orange security light, seared itself onto his mind. He, a man who navigated a world of unimaginable wealth, felt an immediate, visceral clench in his chest, an unfamiliar pang of profound, almost unbearable empathy. He didn't know why this fleeting, desperate moment had such power, but in that instant, the carefully ordered emptiness of his life felt irrevocably disturbed. What happened next, even he couldn't predict, but a desperate need to understand, to do something, began to burn through the fog of his grief. Alexander Sterling was a titan of industry, the architect of a global tech empire. Sterling Global. His name was whispered with awe in boardrooms and plastered across business journals. He lived in a penthouse that was less a home and more a sterile art gallery, floating high above the glittering, indifferent city. Each morning, he woke to panoramic views that stretched to the horizon, a vista of his domain. Yet, the silence within those opulent walls was a suffocating blanket. It had been 2 years since Alara, his vibrant, compassionate wife, had been stolen by a cruel illness, and with her, all the color and warmth had leached from his world. Alara had been his counterpoint, his conscience. She possessed an insatiable curiosity about people and an almost fierce belief in the good of humanity. She'd often spoken of her time volunteering in the Philippines, painting vivid pictures of the people's resilience, their infectious joy despite hardships, and the incredible flavors of their food. She tried to recreate dishes in their kitchen, her laughter filling the space as Alexander fumbled with unfamiliar ingredients. Now, those memories were like ghosts, beautiful but painful, residing in the empty spaces beside him in their vast bed, in the untouched books on her nightstand. His days were a meticulously scheduled sequence of high-stakes meetings, strategic decisions, and the relentless pursuit of growth. He was a consummate professional, cool, decisive, a leader of men and markets. But beneath the bespoke suits and the air of command, Alexander was profoundly adrift. The accolades felt hollow, the billions an abstract number. Each evening, as the city lights began to sparkle below, his loneliness would intensify. He often dismissed his driver, choosing instead to walk for hours through the anonymous streets, the rhythm of his footsteps a somber drumbeat against the backdrop of his grief. He had everything, and yet the core of him felt empty, aching for a purpose beyond the accumulation of more. Thousands of miles from the sun-drenched shores of her homeland, Maria Reyes moved like a shadow through the pre-dawn and late-night hours of the same city. Her life was a relentless cycle of cleaning jobs, one blurring into the next, each scrubbed floor and polished surface, a small step towards keeping her family afloat. She was the sole provider for her ailing mother, Nene Elena, whose medication costs were a constant worry, and for her 2 younger siblings, Mateo and Lita, whose bright futures depended entirely on the remittances she diligently sent home. The weight of this responsibility was a physical ache in her young shoulders. She had once dreamed of being a nurse, of easing pain and bringing comfort. That dream now lay dormant, buried under the urgent needs of the present. She navigated the sprawling, often impersonal city with a quiet resilience, her inherent dignity a fragile shield against the loneliness and the daily grind. The language barrier was sometimes a hurdle, the cultural differences a source of quiet confusion, but her love for her family was a relentless engine, propelling her through exhaustion and despair. The hardest secret she carried, the one that burned with shame each time, was how she often supplemented her meager meals. With the cost of living so high, and every spare penny earmarked for her family, she had begun to rely on the discarded food from the restaurants along her cleaning routes. Each furtive foray into a darkened alleyway, each bite taken with a racing heart and fearful glances over her shoulder, felt like a betrayal of the pride her parents had instilled in her. It was a temporary measure, a desperate act of survival, she told herself, a sacrifice made so her loved ones wouldn't go without. But the fear of discovery, the gnawing hunger that drove her, and the profound loneliness of her struggle were constant companions in her invisible life. One biting November evening, Alexander's restless walk took him down an unfamiliar side street near the financial district. He passed the Toil Door, a high-end restaurant Alara had adored, a place filled with echoes of their shared laughter. A faint sound, a rustle of paper, drew his attention to the narrow service alley beside it. He peered into the gloom, and there she was. It was the same young woman, he was certain now, Maria, kneeling by a large bin overflowing with the day's refuse from the restaurant. Under the sickly orange flicker of a faulty security light, he watched unseen as she carefully, almost reverently, selected a few untouched bread rolls and some wilted greens from a discarded catering tray. Her movements were quick, efficient, yet there was a profound sadness in the slump of her shoulders, a vulnerability that tugged at something deep within him. He saw her quickly eat a roll, her head bowed, casting anxious glances around. The sight was more than just pitiful, it was an affront, not to his sensibilities, but to some fundamental sense of fairness, of human dignity. Alara's voice, her passionate advocacy for the unseen and unheard, resonated in his memory. He felt an almost overwhelming urge to step forward, to offer something. But what? Money felt crass. Words felt inadequate. He didn't want to frighten her, to compound her obvious distress with shame. His heart hammered against his ribs, a confusing mix of anger, pity, and a strange, nascent protectiveness. He retreated silently. The image of Maria in the alley burned into his consciousness, a problem his vast intellect and resources suddenly felt ill-equipped to solve with dignity. Sleep was a distant country that night. Maria's face, her furtive movements, the quiet desperation in her eyes, it all replayed endlessly. Alexander paced his silent penthouse, the glittering city lights below feeling like a personal indictment. How could such stark need exist in the shadow of such obscene wealth? He thought of Alara, her innate ability to connect, to offer comfort without condescension. She would have known precisely how to reach out. He, on the other hand, felt paralyzed by the fear of doing the wrong thing. By the time the gray light of dawn seeped into his apartment, an idea had begun to take shape. It was unconventional, perhaps, but it felt right. It was a way to help without confronting, to offer sustenance without shattering her pride. He remembered Alara's love for chicken adobo, how she called it taste of home, a culinary hug. La Toile d'Or, ironically, had a surprisingly good version on its private catering menu. That evening, Alexander had his driver, Michael, parked discreetly down the street. He'd personally collected a takeaway order from the restaurant, a generous portion of chicken adobo and rice, packed in plain, unmarked containers. His hands felt clammy as he approached the service alley. It was empty. He found a relatively clean, sheltered ledge near the bins and placed a warm container there, along with a sealed bottle of water. Then he retreated to the shadows of his car, his heart thudding with a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Minutes later, Maria appeared, pushing her cleaning cart. He watched her approach the alley, her steps weary. Her eyes, accustomed to scanning the grim surroundings, fell upon the container. She froze. Alexander held his breath. He saw her cautious approach, her hesitant touch, the way she peered around, bewildered. She lifted the container, felt its warmth, and slowly opened the lid. Even from a distance, Alexander could imagine her surprise, the aroma of familiar food reaching her. She clutched it to her chest, her shoulders straightening almost imperceptibly, and looked around again, as if searching for an angel. Then she disappeared deeper into the alley. A profound sense of relief washed over Alexander, followed by an unfamiliar warmth. It was a small gesture, yet it felt more significant than any multi-million-dollar deal. He had touched a life, however anonymously, and he knew, with a quiet certainty, that this was just the beginning. Thus began Alexander's clandestine nightly ritual. One evening, it was a steaming bowl of beef sinigang, its tangy broth a welcome comfort against the city chill. The next, it was pancit, rich with noodles and vegetables. He had his personal chef, sworn to secrecy, prepare these meals, carefully chosen from his memories of Alara's stories or from his own research into Filipino cuisine. Each dish was a silent offering, a tangible expression of his growing concern. He varied the drop-off point slightly, always ensuring the food was fresh, warm, and left where Maria would easily find it. He never included a note, content to observe from a distance. He saw her initial trepidation slowly transform into a hesitant anticipation. He noticed the way her eyes would scan the usual spots as she approached, the flicker of profound relief when she found the unexpected meal. Sometimes he'd see her pause, bow her head for a moment as if in silent prayer, before taking the food. These glimpses into her private gratitude were more rewarding than any public accolade. For Maria, these nightly discoveries were nothing short of miraculous. After the initial shock and confusion, a deep, tearful gratitude had taken root. Someone, an unknown benefactor, was showing her a kindness she had never imagined possible. The food was more than just sustenance. It was a reprieve from the gnawing hunger, a little extra to send home, a flicker of hope in her otherwise bleak existence. The shame she had felt scavenging was slowly being replaced by the warmth of this mysterious generosity. She felt seen, not in a way that exposed her, but in a way that acknowledged her struggle with compassion. One evening, after enjoying a particularly comforting dish of arroz caldo, Maria felt an overwhelming need to acknowledge this silent kindness. She had no pen, no paper, only the simple napkin that had come with the meal. Her fingers, nimble from years of meticulous cleaning, began to fold. She remembered her grandmother teaching her to make paper flowers as a child. With careful creases and patient tucks, she transformed the plain napkin into a delicate, white sampaguita blossom, a symbol of purity, humility, and gratitude. With a trembling hand, she left a tiny paper flower on the ledge where the food had been, a small, heartfelt token for her invisible friend. The next night, as Alexander placed a container of savory care, he saw it, the small, perfectly formed paper sampaguita. He picked it up, his large hand surprisingly gentle. He stared at the fragile creation, a lump forming in his throat. It was so simple, yet so eloquent. A connection had been forged, a silent dialogue of kindness and gratitude. He carefully tucked the paper flower into his wallet, next to a faded photograph of Alara. It felt like a sign, a confirmation that he was on the right path. His nightly missions were no longer just about easing her burden. They were about tending to a flicker of light within his own soul. He felt a growing desire to understand more about this resilient young woman, to offer help that went beyond nightly meals. He made a discreet call to the head of security for the office building Sterling Global owned, the one adjacent to La Toile d'Or, the building Maria cleaned. Alexander's discreet inquiries, conducted through trusted channels that kept his personal involvement hidden, revealed Maria Reyes's name, her employment with a third-party contractor, and her reputation for quiet diligence. She never missed a shift, never complained, and often worked through her breaks. The picture that emerged was of a young woman of remarkable fortitude, carrying an immense burden with quiet grace. The paper sampaguita became a constant reminder of the human connection he had forged. He found himself wanting to do more, something that could offer Maria a genuine escape from her precarious situation. The nightly meals were a temporary solace, but they didn't address the systemic issues that kept her trapped. He decided to take a more direct, though still anonymous, step. One evening, alongside a fragrant serving of chicken tinola, he left a plain envelope. Inside was a substantial amount of cash, enough to cover several weeks of her expenses, enough to perhaps ease the constant pressure of her family's needs. He also included a brief typed note. "You deserve more than scraps. Please accept this. I hope it helps. A friend." He used plain paper and a standard font, leaving no clue to his identity. Leaving the envelope felt like a bigger risk, a more personal intervention. He waited in his usual spot, his nerves frayed. He watched Maria find the meal, then the envelope. He saw her hesitation, then the widening of her eyes as she discovered the contents, and finally, the way she sank onto a nearby step, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs as she read the note. They were tears of disbelief, of overwhelming relief. He stayed hidden, his own eyes unexpectedly moist, respecting her privacy in this intensely emotional moment. A few days later, his security contact casually mentioned that Maria Reyes seemed less burdened, even offering a rare, shy smile to a colleague. The news warmed Alexander, solidifying his resolve. Anonymous aid was good, but true change required something more. It was time to offer a hand up, not just a handout. He couldn't just approach her in the alley. It lacked dignity. He instructed his security chief, David, to discreetly inform Maria that an anonymous benefactor, impressed by her character and aware of her circumstances, wished to speak with her privately in the building staff canteen after a shift, assuring her it was benevolent and for her benefit. Alexander arrived at the small utilitarian staff canteen, feeling a nervousness he hadn't experienced in years. He'd chosen casual attire, hoping to appear less intimidating. He'd arranged for coffee, tea, and pastries. When Maria entered, escorted gently by David, she looked small, apprehensive, clutching her worn bag. Her eyes met his, a flicker of confusion, perhaps a dawning, impossible thought, crossing her face. "Miss Reyes? Maria?" Alexander stood, offering a gentle smile. "Please, come in. My name is Alexander. Thank you for meeting me." She sat tentatively on the edge of a chair. "Are you the one?" she whispered, her voice barely audible, her gaze fixed on him. "The food? The envelope?" He nodded. "Yes, Maria. That was me." He gestured to the coffee. "Why?" she asked, the single word filled with bewilderment. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" "It's mainly because of someone I love very much," Alexander began, his voice soft. "My late wife, Ilera, she had a profound love for your country, for the Filipino people. Their spirit, their kindness in the face of adversity, she spoke of often." He paused, seeing a flicker of understanding in Maria's eyes. "When I saw your dignity in such a difficult situation, it resonated deeply. It reminded me of everything Ilera cherished." He decided to hold back, revealing his identity as the CEO for now. "The food, the money, I hoped it helped. But I felt I could, perhaps, offer something more lasting." Tears welled in Maria's eyes. "You cannot imagine what it meant," she stammered. "I was so desperate. My family back home." "Tell me about them, Maria." Alexander encouraged gently. "Tell me about your dreams." And the story poured out of her. Her mother's illness, her younger siblings, her deferred dream of becoming a nurse, the shame and the fear. Alexander listened with profound empathy, his gaze unwavering. He saw not just a cleaner, but a young woman of incredible strength and love. Ilera would have embraced her. When Maria finished, tears streaming, Alexander reached across the table, his hand briefly covering hers. "Maria," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "your resilience is extraordinary. Your love for your family is deeply moving." He took a breath. "I want to help you achieve those dreams, and I am in a unique position to do so." He paused, then revealed, "The company that owns this building, Sterling Global, I am its CEO, Alexander Sterling." Maria gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. The kind stranger, Alexander. Was he Alexander Sterling? He saw her shock and continued gently, "This isn't charity, Maria. It's an investment in potential, your potential. Ilera always believed in giving people opportunities. I want to offer you a full scholarship to the best nursing school in the city. All your expenses covered. And while you study, a well-compensated administrative role within my company, with flexible hours to accommodate your studies. A role that values your intellect." He added, "And for your mother, we can arrange for her to receive the best medical care here and help you find suitable housing for your family." Maria was speechless, overwhelmed. This kindness was so immense, so life-altering. It felt like a dream. It was heartbreakingly kind, highlighting the depths of her past struggles, while simultaneously offering a future she hadn't dared to imagine. Tears of pure, unadulterated gratitude flowed. Mr. Sterling, Alexander, I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Maria, Alexander replied, his own eyes shining. Just accept. Let us help. Alara would have wanted this. And honestly, he added, a faint, bittersweet smile, helping you. It's the most meaningful thing I've done in a very long time. In her gratitude, he found a balm for his own aching soul, a connection to Alara's enduring spirit. Maria accepted. Her life transformed from that day forward. The scholarship materialized, and she threw herself into nursing studies with a fervor that impressed everyone. Her administrative job at Sterling Global was a revelation. She was respected, her intelligence recognized. The all-consuming financial worry lifted. Arrangements were made, and Nene Elena was brought over, receiving excellent medical care that slowly nursed her back to better health. Mateo and Lita eventually joined them, their new apartment filled with the warmth and security Maria had only dreamed of providing. She excelled, her compassion and diligence making her a natural in the nursing field. Alexander found a profound sense of purpose in Maria's success. Her journey was a living tribute to Alara's values. They developed an unlikely friendship, meeting occasionally for simple lunches, sharing stories. Maria, no longer a figure in the shadows, blossomed into a confident young woman, her future bright. Nearly a year later, Maria invited Alexander for merienda at their apartment. Nene Elena, her strength much restored, beamed as she served traditional Filipino snacks. Mateo and Lita, now thriving in their new school, chatter happily, showing Alexander their drawings. As Maria placed a plate of warm turin before him, her smile was radiant. "Thank you, Alexander," she said softly, her eyes conveying a depth of gratitude beyond words. "For everything." Looking at this joyful family, at Maria on the cusp of realizing her nursing dream, Alexander felt a warmth spread through him, a profound contentment that all his billions could not buy. This was true wealth, the power to uplift, to connect, to witness hope flourish. The city still glittered outside, but for Alexander Sterling and Maria Reyes, its shadows had been vanquished by the enduring light of unexpected, heartbreaking kindness, a testament to empathy's power to bridge any divide and heal the deepest of wounds.